Welcome to the Region of Solutions podcast, where we give you the insider's take on the impactful work and initiatives being undertaken at ESCAP. I'm Veronika, Verner, and today we are diving into the critical issue of transport sustainability in Asia and the Pacific. With freight and passenger demand set to rise dramatically in the coming decades, ensuring efficient, low-emission, and resilient transport systems is more urgent than ever. Today, every expert joining me who are at the forefront of this challenge. They will share insights on how regional cooperation, infrastructure development, and policy innovation are driving progress, including some key takeaways from their work on sustainable transport connectivity. Stay with us as we uncover real-world cases, policy solutions, and what's next for transport in the region. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and about your professional journey. What has driven your interest in sustainable development?
Well, thank you, Veronika, for having us on this podcast. So my name is Nguyen Chen, and I'm leading the Innovation and Policy Analytics team at the International Transport Forum, also known as ITF. So for those who may not be familiar with ITF, we are an intergovernmental organization with 69 member countries. And each year we bring together transport ministers from around the world, including guest countries as well, at our annual summit, where we shape policies for better, more sustainable transport. At the ITF, we're not just a ministerial policy forum, we are also a think tank. And we focus on making transport greener, safer, more efficient, and also more accessible for everyone. I always have been studying transport since my bachelor's degree and right through my PhD as well. So over these years, I've come to realize how crucial it is to make transport more sustainable, not just for the environment, but also for the future generations.
Hi everyone, my name is Nguyen, Communications Officer for the Transport Division ESCAP. Just to be short, sustainable transport is the name of our business. It is what we are most passionate about, to raise the awareness of, to raise the support for, both in terms of policy framework and actual collaborations between governments, between industry and international organizations. We are a neutral platform that enables experts and policymakers to mingle and to share knowledge. We also hope that we can help countries in the region catch up to other countries in terms of development of sustainable transports through our research guides and other practical guides.
Thank you, Michael. So we also have guests from Global Sustainable Transport Innovation and Knowledge Center. Could you please tell us a bit about your organization and your personal journey in sustainable transport?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Xie Hui. I'm from the Global Sustainable Transport Innovation and Knowledge Center. I have had a very fulfilling professional career dedicated to maritime transport and sustainable transport. I've been very actively involved in the China Maritime Safety Administration. Over there, I have been involved in several key positions, for example, the Director of Navigation, Director of International Affairs. My journey also includes my service in the Chinese permanent mission to the International Maritime Organization. In 2023, I took on the position of the Deputy Director General of the Global Sustainable Transport Innovation and Knowledge Center.
Now I will go to the most common questions that we ask in every episode of our podcast, which is, what solutions are you working on for the Asia-Pacific region?
So at the ITF, currently, or one of our ongoing key initiatives is the regional connectivity enhancement for Central and Southeast Asia under this OECD-led Sustainable Infrastructure Program in Asia, also known as SIPA. So this project helps countries to identify connectivity gaps so we know where investment development should be needed in the coming decades. We also help them to promote sustainable transport solutions such as green mobility, cleaner technology, and smarter infrastructure, etc. We also help them to build resilience so the transport systems can keep running smoothly, even during crisis. And for this project, we jointly hosted a side event at the ESCAP Transport Committee meeting last year, and we look at the connectivity, sustainability, and resilience of freight transport in Southeast, North and Central Asia. So this was a great opportunity to collaborate with the transport division of ESCAP, and we brought together countries and stakeholders to discuss how can we strengthen the connectivity of the freight transport systems and at the same time ensure that they can adapt to climate change and also to major disruptions while reducing emissions at the same time.
Thanks for sharing.
First of all, we are partners with ESCAP. So we work very closely to support the work of ESCAP in the area of sustainable transport. We focus on two aspects. One is cooperation. The other one is innovation. We are working on a range of solutions to advance sustainable transport. One of our flagship initiatives is organizing Global Sustainable Transport Forum every year. During the forum, the transport ministers, industry leaders, and also experts will gather together to discuss and promote policies for sustainable transport. The forum is actually a platform to share insights, to foster collaboration, and also driving actionable strategies. So that is one of our solutions. Another one I would like to share with you is we organize the International Exhibition for Transport Technology and Equipment. This exhibition showcases cutting-edge technologies, innovations.
So, Michael, what about ESCAP? If you could elaborate on what are the most pressing challenges that people face when it comes to transportation in the region?
So if we are talking about electric mobility, some of the hurdles is the high upfront costs of electric vehicles and also the need for significant investments in charging infrastructure. Countries that have previously a high reliance on fossil fuels and on fossil fuels infrastructure for transport now would have to make the switch, sometimes in a literal sense, to change to one that supports electric vehicles. And we are talking about charging stations in addition to a lot of things. Also, they need to ensure that electricity grids can support an influx of electric vehicles. If we have tens of thousands of electric vehicles that enter the system, we need to make sure that the grid can sustain the increased demand.
Let me jump in here to talk about these pressing challenges. I think this region is sitting at this turning point at the moment. The region is growing very fast, but also comes with some big challenges. I'd say one of the biggest issue is the infrastructure gaps in many places, especially in Central and Southeast Asia, based on the project that we are working on at the moment. There just aren't enough efficient transport links or corridors for businesses to move goods and for people to travel. Without better connectivity, I think the economic growth and access to essential services will be held back. And then there is this environmental concern because there is a rise in vehicles, industry, and freight transport, etc. This has led to a huge increase in emissions in this region, making this air pollution worse and also accelerates climate change in this region. So if we don't take actions on this, I think transport will be continuing to be one of the biggest contributors to global emissions.
Since we are talking about the e-mobility, I think I share the view of Guineng that one of the challenges is that the very fast urbanization, which is happening across this region. I mean, cities are expanding very fast. This leading to severe congestion, longer commuting times, and also air pollution. Another challenge is that currently many cities are lack of sustainable transport options. For economic growth, we need safe and efficient transport. For gender equality, we need inclusive transport. For health and well-being, we need accessible and economical transport. Therefore, for this area, we need very strong support from sustainable transport systems.
Many of you mentioned electric vehicles, and that's what I think most of the people think of when they hear sustainable transport. But are there some lesser known solutions or innovations in transport that are also making a big difference?
Thank you for raising that issue. It is true that a lot of people just talk about sustainable transport as merely about green, low carbon transport. The perception that sustainable transport is only about electric vehicles should be revised. Sustainable transport is to ensure that transport is safe, is efficient, is economically beneficial, but at the same time also ensuring lower emissions and ensuring that all communities, including the elderly, the underserved communities, the physically impaired communities are properly served by transport.
I think there are other things that should also be considered. For example, we're making our public transportation smarter. Cities are adopting, for example, intelligent transport systems or ITS that uses real-time data to optimize the bus and train schedules, etc., to reduce congestion and improve energy efficiency. That's also one of the solutions, right, to make the system more sustainable. We also need to consider walkability of the city and also maybe bikeability of the city as well. So we need to provide pedestrian-friendly infrastructure and safe cycling lanes, right, to make the cities more livable while reducing the CO2 emissions too. And some of the cities are already adopting the car-free zones or low-emission zones. These are all effective and sustainable transport options that allow us to go beyond just electrifying the car fleets.
When I travel outside China, I can also see a lot of electrical buses made in China. I was told that those buses actually can save nearly 10 billion liters of fuel over the years. It is quite natural people talk about electrical buses or cars, but there are many other alternative options to promote sustainable transport. For example, digitalization, the intelligent transport system. Recently, a Chinese company called BYD issued the pilot system, which is intelligent driving assistant system. This kind of system really changed what we think to promote smart and safe driving. The system can provide autonomous features to make transport much safer, much comfortable, and much more sustainable.
I would like to talk about the Regional Action Program for Sustainable Transport Development. It sets an ambitious vision, but I would like to learn how is your work contributing to its implementation?
ESCAP has developed this Regional Action Program for Sustainable Transport Development. That action program sets an ambitious vision for the region's sustainable transport development. It's a very important program. One of the examples I can share with you is the Global Sustainable Transport Best Practice Initiative. There are two processes here. The first step is to collect and compile the global sustainable transport best practices. The second step is to share and promote the best practices globally so that people can benefit from these best practices. And also we support the dissemination and promotion and the replication of these best practices, not only in Asia Pacific, but also beyond, so that we can really encourage more countries, more people to use such best practices so that to support the sustainable transport development.
ESCAP's Regional Action Program for Sustainable Transport Development actually aligns very well with this ITF's key focus areas, which are decarbonization, universal access, connectivity, safety and security, innovation, and digitalization. So these are the 5 key focus areas of ITF. In each of the areas, we can contribute very well to the program, and ITF is actively supporting the implementation of such program through several key initiatives. I think both organizations are really advocating for transport systems that are accessible to all and including vulnerable populations. So working together, we are really making significant strides towards achieving the ambitious vision set by this Regional Action Program.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to add something?
One of our roles is to facilitate dialogue, facilitate collaborations, and also share the latest trends and knowledge and data for policymakers, researchers, academics interested in the region. Last year, in November 2024, we hosted the 8th Committee on Transport. During this committee, the Transport Division also launched the 2024 Review of Development in Transport in Asia and the Pacific, Transitions Towards Sustainable Transport Solutions. In this report, we highlighted growing transport demand, rapid motorization, surging transport CO2 emissions, or rising road fatalities for elderly populations, as well as like gender gaps in transport workforce. Those are just some of the challenges.
So actually what I'm really curious about is what role do we as individuals play in supporting or advocating for sustainable transport systems in our cities and countries?
I think many people think transport policy is something only government and experts handle, and it's none of my business. but I think that perception might be wrong, or it is wrong. While governments design policies and invest in infrastructure, I think individual choices and actions can really drive the real change. For example, in terms of choosing sustainable transport options, it's the users who make their choice. I think whenever possible, we should choose sustainable modes, for example, walking, cycling, or taking public transport instead of driving. If driving is really necessary, then we should perhaps consider, okay, maybe carpooling or use electric cars or use shared mobility services, and also need to support, let's say, bike sharing and e-scooter services that also reduces congestion and pollution, right? So these are kind of many options that we can choose to make our travel more sustainable. The second point, I think that as an individual, what we could do is engage more with the local decision makers whenever possible. So many cities, they hold public consultations on transport projects. I know that this is not something that most of the people do, but if possible, try to attend them and advocate for better public transit and safer bike lanes or pedestrian-friendly streets, etc. So support this kind of local sustainable transport initiatives and push for better policies.
Thank you. I feel like we do have more power when we usually think.
I mean, we are not just a user of the transport system. We can also be advocator and innovator. Everybody can make a difference. Not only we can reduce emissions by riding a bike or e-bike, we can inspire other people to take more greener transport alternatives.
Thank you for these fascinating insights and examples. It has been very wonderful to learn from your expertise. Before we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from today's conversation? Maybe some food for thought.
Personally, I see that with sustainable transport, there can be a lot of misconceptions or even disinformation. One is the perception that sustainable transport is only about green vehicles or low carbon mobility, stuff that sounds expensive. What I can do as a person is to educate people around me.
We need to understand what is transport, why transport is very important. From my understanding, transport is an enabler for development. It is a prerequisite for success. Everybody can make a difference. Everybody is a contributor to sustainable transport.
Thank you. I'd like to just echo what Mr. Xie just said. I think if there's one thing I want listeners to remember from my perspective, it's that sustainable transport isn't just about policies or big investments. It impacts all of us. So whether it's how we commute, how goods are moved, or how our cities are built, we all have a role to play in making our transport greener, smarter, and more accessible.
And that's all for today's episode of A Region of Solutions. A big thank you to our guests for sharing their expertise with us. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring stories from ESCAP. Until the next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and be a part of a solution for our region.